He's Henry Gomez, a 25-year ad agency strategist, and today he's broadcasting from the International Space Station orbiting the Earth. Can't you tell, folks? No, seriously, he's in Key West having a good time on a boat, his boat.
He's Howard Eibach, a former copywriter and creative director and the author of 2 books on the creative brief. And together we're the Brief Brothers, having an ongoing discussion about creative briefs, briefing, and advertising. Today, we wanted to talk about a video that you sent me of one of our favorites, Dave Trott, of course, famous, legendary creative, both in the U.S. and the U.K. And he in the video, he basically talks about advertising and the golden age of advertising, I think, as we all recognize it to be starting in the 1960s. And he talks about like some of the things that unify these great ads and these great campaigns and what made them different from what came before and certainly what's come more recently. So what are some of your thoughts and impressions? And I'll give you some of mine.
Yeah. Well, first of all, one of the cool things about this is it's a fairly recent conversation that he's had. So it's new. It's not new thinking on his part, but it is a new talk from Dave Trott. For those of us who follow his regular columns or his blog posts, he's always got some interesting insight, pithy insights, unique comments. So it's kind of fun to see him now kind of live on tape, talking to a virtual audience and giving us a history. And for me, it culminates a lot of things that you and I have been talking about since we launched the Brief Brothers in January. A single idea, the idea that it's an idea first, tactic second, idea-driven ads, entertainment, becoming famous, avoiding gimmicks and avoiding the techniques. So he really does, I think, an amazing job of doing what Dave Trott has always done so well, getting right to the point. Now, the other thing I want to make clear is that we're going to put a link in our YouTube page that if you haven't seen this video, which I found on LinkedIn, it was posted on LinkedIn, but we'll make sure that anyone can look at it. It's about a 40-minute talk, so it's well worth your time, and it's a history lesson. So I think the thing that I take away from this more than anything else is, and it's how it's related to the creative brief, which is our bailiwick, and that is drive the idea first. Drive the idea first. So many times when I do training and workshops, I hear people say when they look at a good brief, where are the tactics? Where are the deliverables? And I say that's not what a creative brief is designed to do. It's designed to get creatives to think about the idea. What's going to summarize the best and the brightest about the product or the service and build your campaign around that, and then figure out how do we execute. So he drives that home with a hammer, with a sledgehammer. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big fan of Dave's, and I agree with a lot of what he says. There's a few things that if I parse his words a little bit, I can disagree with. It seems to me that he kind of has this before and after view, where like before 1960, before Volkswagen and DDB, it was the stone ages of advertising, and certainly advertising had progressed and evolved over the decades before 1960. And I think we go back to great advertising by people like Caples, and that, they laughed when I sat down at the piano, being a famous ad that I think people universally recognize as being a great ad from way before 1960. I think what changed in the 60s was a little bit of the tone of advertising. There was what Bill Bernbach brought was kind of that New York sensibility, that sense of humor, that very urban, educated, kind of wink and a nod type of advertising that brought the consumer in on the joke. And what to me, what made it great was the fact that it was different than what had existed before. So anytime something becomes overused by everybody, then when somebody does something different, it stands out. And I think that helps us to remember some of the things like the stuff for the rye bread that that Bernbach and company did, and for all the, a lot of the agencies in New York specifically picked up on a lot of this kind of the writing style, and the inside joke, and that sense of humor, almost like a Woody Allen-esque sense of humor that so there's that part of it. And then there's the part where he talks about, not having so many techniques or special effects or CGI, like everything had to be produced and done. Any product demo had to actually be done, somehow to film it. It wasn't, you knew that you weren't seeing some sort of fake demo. And I think that's true. I think technology in a way has hurt the advertising business. I'll give you an example. In the old days, the stereotype was the art director, the copywriter would come up with the ad on a cocktail napkin, right? And they would sketch it out, and they would show the client a drawing of the ad. Nowadays, with Photoshop and the tools that that the art directors have, the first comp of the ad looks like a finished ad.
Right.
So then when the client sees the ad, the first thing that he does is like, oh, I don't like this photograph or the font, or he's focusing on tactical details instead of on the idea, because he's been trained to basically see a finished ad.
And whose fault is that? That's our fault.
Oh, of course it is.
Yeah.
But it's part of, the pressure of wanting to have a better execution to show the client, and also the time, right? Like, you don't, the amount of time.
Yeah, I think though we've allowed clients to push us back into a corner with the time, and we haven't pushed back. We haven't pushed back nearly enough to say, look, you want this thing done right. You want this done with an idea-driven ad that will stand out, that'll make you famous, the way Byron Sharp talks about. We, as an industry, haven't pushed back. We haven't allowed that to happen. But I want to go back to something you said earlier about the tone changing. I think that's a serious undervaluing of what really changed in the 60s. It was more than just tone. I grant you that tone is a key part of it. But what Dave Trott is saying, and I think what giants like Ogilvy and Bernbach and others did, was change the entire approach of advertising. If you go back and look at that ad you referenced earlier, they laughed when I sat down to play the piano. That's a classic direct response ad. It wasn't a branding ad. It wasn't branding the way you and I understand branding today. What I think distinguishes the Volkswagen ads as perhaps a Rubicon that was crossed is that this was an entirely new way to build a brand. It was about creating a niche, creating a specific space for that brand to exist. And even if you said things that others could say, if you're the first one to say it, if you're the first one to do it, you own it. A lot of agencies tried to copy what DDB did in the 60s. Some, came close, but everybody was doing essentially the same thing prior to all this. And what Dave does, and what viewers of this video will love, is his compilation of examples of what he called the more school of advertising. Pack your ads, and he uses TV as the example. Pack your TV spots with as much stuff about the product, and he used cars as an example, as you possibly can, until you just are overwhelmed with information and features and benefits and can't remember anything that was said. All of a sudden, that came to a halt with DDB and Volkswagen, and they focused on a single idea. So yeah, it was a change in tone, but it's far more than just tone.
Agreed, but I think that we could also cherry pick a bunch of bad ads from the 1960s. In fact, the reel that he shows at the beginning, a lot of it is pre-1960 advertising, but toward the end of that reel of the bad ads, there's ads that you could see are easily go into the 70s and 80s that are included in there. So I think there's always been a bell curve in advertising. Yep. In terms of some of it is great and some of it is okay, and some of it is frankly awful, and some of the awful advertising is probably going to be more memorable than some of just the bland, run of the mill.
It's more than just a bell curve, and I think that's a great analogy. There's always going to be that, the unique group over here, and the crap over here, and then there's the average folks in the middle. But it's like the whole curve shifted. And now what we consider brilliant is vastly different than what we considered brilliant prior to 1960. It's an entirely different world. And we can thank a handful of people for that change, for that crossing that kind of advertising conceptual Rubicon. And that's what Dave is reminding us. The other thing I took away from his video was these ads treat us consumers like grown-ups. They respect us. The creative director I work for, from whom I learned the most, I'll say his name, Tom Jordan, who was the creative leader at Hoffman York in Milwaukee, used to say to me a version of what Ogilvy used to say. But Tom Jordan's version was, draw the circle, but don't complete it. Trust your consumer, trust your audience to figure it out. Don't hit them over the head. And that's what these spots, that's the change to me. If you look at those 50 spots that he showed, the TV spots for cars, there was no room for interpretation. It was all slammed in your face.
Yeah, they were talking at you. They weren't having a conversation with you or intriguing you, or it was just basically
telling a story. They weren't telling a story.
Yeah.
It was just a list. It was just an outline. It was what I like to call, it was just a lecture. They were lecturing us on the benefits of the car without giving me time to reflect and think about it, be engaged. Do I want to see that spot again? Nope, saw it, move on. Do I want to see that spot that he played about? Would you ever stop to think about what the snowplow driver drives to get to the snowplow? And we see just long, quiet footage of the Volkswagen driving through the snow. It's like, yeah, I want to see that again. That's kind of interesting. It's entertainment.
Yep. The other thing on the technology side is, I think it's devalued what creatives do. I think that, I'm going to edit this podcast on my MacBook, right, using iMovie. It's a very primitive version of what professionals in a post-production studio have, right, in order to edit things. And every client has access to the same software that I'm going to use to edit this video, and I'm not a professional, and anybody that's ever watched the Brief Brothers knows that when it comes to editing, I'm not a professional. But the point is, they think that it's easy. And they edit their home movies on their MacBooks. We're putting these comps in front of them, and so like they think it's easy. So it's kind of devalued what we do. Where I think back in the day, filming a TV commercial, you couldn't do it on your iPhone. I think that's if you look at the latest iPhone commercials from Apple, it's basically, this is a professional movie camera in your pocket, basically, is what they're the insinuation. That wasn't the case. You needed a big 35 millimeter, camera that costs tens of thousands of dollars a day to rent, and then cans of film, and not anybody could operate the thing and to light everything, So I think we've devalued a little bit what we do through technology.
The implication is, if I got all these bells and whistles and tools and gimmicks and techniques, who needs an idea?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I mean, we talked about this. I mentioned this before we started taping. We talked about this during our review of the Super Bowl spots. And the one I remember that I thought was all hat and no, I forget what the phrase is, but it's all sizzle, no steak. That's the other one I think of. Was the Doritos spot starring Matthew McConaughey, where he just becomes literally two-dimensional. It's like someone had found this great technique, this great computer software or something, said, oh, let's make Matthew McConaughey flat. That would be really cool. It's like, what's the idea? Who cares? It looks cool. That's just an example of what we have done to ourselves, or allowed to have done to us as an industry.
Agreed. And the last thing was, he kind of insinuates at the end that one of the reasons why advertising is taking a turn for the worst is the advent of account planning or account strategy. And he doesn't really delve into it too deeply, but I again, with the bell curve, I think there are good strategists and there are bad strategists, and then there's a lot of just adequate strategists. I think that if you go back to the 70s and 80s, when people like Stephen King were pioneering planning in the UK, a lot of that advertising was great. So I don't think that the presence of planning in and of itself um, is a problem. Maybe it became commoditized, and everybody had planning, but not everybody had good planning, and I think that probably is the difference.
I think that the episode we did some weeks or a couple months ago by the planner whose name I forget now, but he identified some of the briefs that give you grief,
Mm-hmm.
and he talked about the different ways planners can make the brief writing process and the brief itself challenging, the exact opposite of what a brief is supposed to do. That's an example of what you're talking about. So, I've reached out to Dave to see if he would come on our show. And I'm saying this now in case someone of our 47 viewers, has a connection to Dave, maybe to light a fire under him, to encourage him to accept our invitation to come on and talk. Because I'd like to hear what he has to say about account planning as being a reason or one of his reasons why advertising isn't as good. So maybe someone out there can help unlock a door that we can so we can talk to Dave. It's worth a try.
Would love to have Dave Trott on, and one of my heroes, even if I don't agree with everything he says. Who says you have to agree with everything someone says to like them? I think
exactly.
I definitely do teach a lot of what he says when I teach my workshops. So,
and who knows, if we could get Dave on our show, we might actually double the number of viewers who tune in.
Yeah, maybe to like 96 or something. Yeah,
something
cool.
like that. It could help. All right, good stuff, Henry.
Good stuff, Howard. Okay, Howard. Today for our creative review, we're in for a treat. It is hefty with a new scent, Fabuloso. And let's take a look at this 15-second spot. We don't know who the agency is.
Whoa. How do they get these things to smell so good? Must be magic. Hefty Ultra Strong with Fabuloso scent.
Okay, so tell me, what do you think?
Well, this to me fits the description of what Dave Trott was talking about and what we were sharing with our viewers in the first part of our episode. An example of a spot that relied too much on a technique or a gimmick and not enough on an idea. I mean, it's kind of cool to see that can opener, the trash can lid open up and we see a light, little music. And then he goes on and on about how did these trash bags get to smell this good? It must be magic. It's all execution, no idea. And apparently this guy's some kind of famous celebrity, former wrestler. Yeah, who cares? To me, it's technique, all sizzle, no steak. That's what I think.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty awful spot. John, they got a celebrity, spent a lot of money. This guy is a bankable star right now, a recognizable face. I don't know really what he has to do with garbage bags, but it's okay if you find a way to kind of make the tie-in, right? I don't think they made the tie-in there. The other interesting thing to me, as it comes right at the very end, is that the scented bags are scented with Fabuloso, which is a cleaner product that's favored in the Hispanic market, as you can tell by the name Fabuloso. But they don't do anything with that angle of it, right? Like, Hispanic consumers, particularly when it comes to cleaning products, are very scent driven. And so these products like Fabuloso are known for the variety of scents and the strong scents that they have. And they didn't, it's kind of this joint like branding with Fabuloso, and they didn't do anything to really what are the benefits of Fabuloso, or why do people that like it so much? And it is kind of like a cult thing in the Hispanic market. So I think that they miss probably a really interesting area to go down, which is like, you have a trash bag, you want it to smell good, you don't want, to smell like garbage. And Fabuloso is this thing that's regarded as being this really good smelling, your house smells clean when you smell Fabuloso, at least in the Hispanic market. And maybe there was a way to introduce that to people that aren't Hispanic and to do it in a clever way. And they completely missed that opportunity. So
Yeah.
I this one, thumbs down. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, the only benefit I could see is that it was only 15 seconds. It might have improved if it had been 6 seconds, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of like the old joke is like, first, I won a contest once. First prize was a week in Philadelphia. Second prize was 2 weeks in Philadelphia. It's like, the more of this there is, the worse.
Yeah, well, it's almost a play on what Mark Twain used to say. I apologize for writing such a long letter. If I had more time, I would have made it shorter.
Yeah. Oh,
Good stuff, Henry.
All right, Howard. Well, bad stuff in this case, but
yeah, he's Henry Gomez.
And he's Howard Eibach. Together we're the Brief Brothers. Till next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.